Hello everyone and welcome to the first game we'll be showing from the Grenke Freestyle Chess Open Tournament that started, well, basically an hour and a half ago. I thought I'd be covering the games tomorrow as I expected them to last longer, but Magnus and Vincent finished their game very quickly. It's the first game that finished, so I thought, well, let's see what happened. And yeah, as you guys know, the Grenke Chess Classic is one of the biggest tournaments. You know, if you count the amount of people that actually show up at the tournament, it's the biggest tournament in the world. And this year, along with the regular Grenke Chess Classic tournament, there's also the freestyle version. And while there are some strong players in the normal chess section, most of the top guys are playing in the freestyle chess open. So yeah, let's check it out. This is the first game we'll be covering: Magnus Carlsen versus Vincent Hillerman. He's rated 2227. His peak rating is above 2300, so he's definitely a strong player. But I was very much interested in. Okay, we all know how someone with such a rating would fare against Magnus in regular chess. There's very little chance that he would even survive the opening. But in scrambled pieces chess, anything could happen. Perhaps, or maybe it's even more difficult as you have to play a non-known position for against Magnus from move 1, so it's basically you who are not protected by the safety of theory. But yeah, let's check it out. It's quite an interesting game. Magnus with white opens with pawn to g4, and it's something sort of that we've discussed already many times. It's the standard as in normal chess. You want to open up the bishop, you want to open up the queen, and the rook. If you can do all of it with one move, g4 makes the most sense. So this is what Magnus plays. And while you could continue symmetrically with the g5, or maybe a bit more, safe approach with pawn to g6, it's very dangerous. Same as when we have b4, b5, you always have to worry about a4. And here, if pawn to g5, for example, h4 is already very dangerous. Where you could go into h5, but this is just an all-out war starting from move 1. For example, captures, and now if rook captures on g4, you have to calculate rook to h1. Look at all these undefended pieces. For example, knight e3 to defend the bishop, already d5, with ideas of knight c6 and d4, dislodging the knight, capturing the bishop. It's a complete mess, but yeah, I mean, you could go for that. Instead, we have pawn to b6, opening up this diagonal. There's a queen on h1, so of course bishop to b7 is the intended move. We have bishop to g2 and bishop to b7. We have pawn to a4, and stopping any further advancement like pawn to a5 by playing pawn to a5 himself. We have bishop captures on b7, knight captures, and here Magnus strikes with pawn to d3. Again, very interesting how differently you would deal with the position, for example, on move 4 than an engine would. The engine wants to play rook a3, rook to h3, which is probably something that comes to mind, but you're like, yeah, that probably doesn't work. But yeah, it does. So here, pawn to d4 by Magnus. We have pawn to g6 by Vincent, and pawn to c3. Magnus just strengthening the d4 pawn, preparing pawn to e4, maybe even pawn to f4. He could go all out here. And we have pawn to h5. Here, probably the last chance for black to open up with pawn to e5, where getting the queen into the game would be great for him. Magnus would probably go queen to d5, and then you say something like captures, you bring the knight to d6, you chase away the queen with c6, and you try and organize an attack against this d4 pawn. But okay, Vincent played pawn to h5, and Magnus said, we are not opening up your queen, pawn to g5, which does a great job keeping the rook in the game. The bishop cannot come to h6 to trade it off. You can play bishop g7, but not very useful. The queen also has problems getting into the game, so it makes sense. And e4 is coming. We have knight e to d6, and first knight to d3 by Magnus, bishop to g7, and Magnus grabs the center with pawn to e4, enjoying his setup, preparing to bring the bishop into the game, probably to f4 to nicely go after the black king. Knight to e3, maybe castles queenside. and so on. And here you could play e5, but it's very, very difficult to figure out how to develop your pieces here. Even if Magnus captures, which is the best idea, for example, captures 93, still not a lot of ways for you to develop your pieces. You have to bring your bishop back, go rook to e8, and you know, just hope for the best. Maybe the knight can come to f5 at some point if the f pawn moves, but very unlikely. So after e4, Vincent decided to give up the bishop for Magnus's huge center. He played bishop captures on d4, and yes, it's a piece, but also 2 pawns. Also, maybe the third pawn will fall. Definitely some compensation there. C captures on d4 and queen captures on d4. While it is a very, very good practical decision, you know, against Magnus, very good practical decision is not enough to do something about it. And Magnus plays queen to f3. Now here I will show you a line, and it's the last big line we are going to show in this video because I think it's beautiful. If Magnus were to continue, you know, in the way of the engine, rook to a3, this is where black really starts feeling it. For example, knight captures on e4. Okay, you win the third pawn. Now rook e1. You pressure the knight, and if the knight moves, you're going to go after the e7 pawn. Let's say pawn to d5. Bishop to e3. Attacks the queen, and okay, you're not going to lose the queen. Queen to c4. But now knight to e5. And look at this. If you go to b4, knight to c6 check will pick up the queen. And other moves also not that impressive. But if you go to a6, it's not that you will lose the rook or anything, because you are very close to it. But the queen is completely out of the game, and you can just checkmate that black king. For example, knight c6 check. King c8, knight captures on e7. Now you have to go to d7, otherwise you're just going to be, well, down a full rook. King to d7, and now knight captures on d5. And after, let's say, rook g to e8, because your knight here is also hanging, knight 1 to c3, let's say we trade something off, captures, rook 8 to c8, and now knight to f6 with check, and look at this. King to d8, queen to d5 with check, knight to d6, and now look at this spectacular move. Or rather, no, feel free to pause the video and solve this, you know, theoretical position while I give you a couple of seconds. The move in question is queen captures on d6. Yes, absolutely disgusting, but you know, it's a line that didn't happen, but I wanted to show you what was possible. Bishop captures on b6 check. You can play rook to c7, and then rook captures on e8 is checkmate, or you capture the bishop, and then rook captures on e8 is checkmate again. So after queen captures on d4, Magnus played queen to f3. We have queen captures on e4, grabbing another pawn, but there is no way to avoid losing the e7 pawn. Magnus captures on e4, knight captures rook e1, and if you defend the knight f3, dislodges it, rook captures on e7, and then those pawns will be very weak. So he played knight e to d6 right away, and Magnus captured on e7. We have castle's queen side, and now the d7 pawn is defended. Magnus develops knight c3, we have pawn to c6, and bishop to e3, putting pressure on the b6 pawn, and there isn't all that much Vincent can do here. If you play pawn to c5 to sort of limit the power of the bishop, knight d5 is just, I mean, game over. If after bishop to e3 you play pawn to b5, it doesn't really help you all that much. You can just trade captures, and after, let's say, captures and captures, you'll play king a2. Now rook c1, check is coming, the bishop is coming to b6, the knight can come to e5 or c5, f7 pawn is hanging, so it would be, you know, a very quick game. So after bishop to e3, king to c7 was played, defending the b6 pawn, and now Magnus plays bishop f4, pins the knight, and not a lot of moves that you can play here. As the bishop moved from attacking the b6 pawn, Vincent played king to c8, and Magnus just played bishop back to c1, and believe it or not, it was in this position on move 18 that Vincent Hillerman resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. I think he figured out that, okay, I mean, all of my pieces are completely immovable, basically. I could, you know, prolong this game and make Magnus suffer, but I'm gonna call it a day, and he just resigned here. And it's not a bad decision, actually, because if we play a couple of best moves for black, as there just aren't any, let's say you play rook g to e8, okay, you can trade, captures, bishop e3. Again, you have the problem of this pawn, for example, king c7, again, you can pin the knight, and if black unpins, knight to e5, goes after the f7 pawn, we'll prepare an attack against the knight, and okay, we could play a couple more moves. Let's say knight c5, castles queenside. What can you play? Knight maybe coming to b7, or no, that's not going to work. We could bring the other knight to help out to defend this knight. And it seems like, okay, maybe you're holding on. This is defended. This is defended. If bishop comes to e3, we can play king to c7. The knight here guarding f7. So, okay, that's defended. But it all, you know, falls apart with a nice knight captures on c6 tactic. And that's it. D captures, bishop captures on d6. The rook is also there. And after captures and captures, you're down a knight. You have one pawn for the knight. And not for very long. The pawn is hanging. You can also go after the f7 pawn, some f3, knight e4. The knight quickly comes into the game, so it was not a bad call to resign after bishop to c1. So yeah, Magnus wins round 1. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Now, today we have only one round, as today's games have started pretty late. I think 6:30 Central European time. But from tomorrow there will be 4 days with 2 games being played every day, which is a pretty fierce tempo. Very much eager to see how it goes, but yeah, it doesn't seem like these games will last as long as normal classical chess, as I mean, mistakes will happen far more often. So yeah, very nicely done by Magnus. Like I said, this is the first game that finished. Magnus took the first point, so we'll see if he can continue in this spirit, and who gets to play him in round 2. This was a great opportunity for anyone, but you know, it's random, so Vincent Sillerman got the honor of facing the great Magnus. So, hope you enjoyed it. Back to Scrambled Chess, I guess. I would like to thank Derek King, Charles Benjamin Flynn, Dan Schwartz, Ilya Matsev, and Mohammed Babar Khalil for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.